afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Farm to Institution Summit. Session 4 will begin shortly. Please note that the session will be recorded. I have muted all participants as you enter, and if you would, please turn your camera off until after all presentations have ended. At the end of the presentations, there will be an interactive workshop in which you will be placed into breakout rooms. We will provide further instruction at that time. You are welcome to use the chat function throughout the presentation, as well as the hand raising feature during the Q&A portion at the end of the session. Both are located in your toolbar, either at the top or bottom of your screen. The moderators will be following the chat to ensure questions are addressed as time permits. If you prefer to ask your question, please use the hand raise feature and a moderator will call upon you to turn your camera on and unmute yourself. Again, welcome back to the Farm to Institution Summit. Thanks for your time. Session 4 will begin shortly. Mary, it looks like we have quite a few participants being added as we speak. You are welcome to go ahead and start if you would like.
Wonderful, thank you, Nikki. And hello, everyone. My name is Mary Nally. I am the director of the Ohio University Center for Campus and Community Engagement and one of the members of the Farm to Ohio work group. Thank you to our panelists and all of you in the audience joining us today. This session focuses on the triple bottom line benefits of procurement of local foods. We have here today local and state representatives on our panel who will answer questions about the benefits of purchasing local food, how to measure those benefits, and what policies and practices need to be in place locally and statewide to promote local food purchase and procurement. This session will be followed by an interactive workshop demonstrating a new triple bottom line cost-benefit analysis tool that is currently under development at Ohio University. So we will begin by inviting our presenters to introduce themselves and to share their background in relation to this subject of local food purchase and procurement and triple bottom line strategies. So we will begin with Elizabeth Douglas, the Education Program Specialist at the Ohio Department of Education. Elizabeth?
Hi, thank you so much, Mary, and welcome everyone. I'm just giving a quick introduction, correct, right now? Okay. I'm Elizabeth Douglas. I'm with the Ohio Department of Education. I am one of the child nutrition program specialists there. So we work with the federal programs, the school lunch program, school breakfast, summer meals, and the child and adult care food program. Within that, we have Farm to School, which is kind of an offshoot of combining all of those programs. And I would be the contact or the coordinator at that level for Farm to School. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you, Elizabeth, for being here. Next, we have Chmiel, who is, among many things, one of the Athens County Commissioners, as well as co-owner of Integration Acres. Chris?
That was a pretty good introduction. I could repeat that, but yeah, basically before I was a county commissioner and still as a county commissioner, I do have a farm. I vend at the farmer's market and, we sell stuff locally and really believe that, you know, the local food economy is really important to our local economy. So glad to be here.
Thank you, Chris, and here's to that. Next, we have Susie Huser, the Communications and Donation Station Program Director, at Community Food Initiatives. Susie?
Thank you, Mary. So yes, I'm Susie Huser, and I direct communications in the donation station at CFI. CFI's vision is for a resilient region in which everyone in our community has access to an equitable, inclusive, and thriving local food system. And I moved to Athens to join CFI specifically because I was inspired by that approach. And also by CFI's values, which include triple bottom line elements. In order to build community resilience, it's imperative that as a society, we shift our view to include the triple bottom line when we think about benefits rather than just thinking about profit. And my work at CFI has really clearly illustrated the impact that institutions can have on a local food system and the necessity of a thriving and equitable local food system if we hope to work for climate, food, and social justice.
Well said, Susie. Thank you very much. Last but not least, we have Abbey Rodjom, the Ohio University Environmental Studies graduate student, who will introduce herself and her background in relation to the subject, and then she will transition to a short presentation on the triple bottom line so that we are all speaking the same language moving forward. Abbey?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Abbey. I'm a recent alum, but I'm going to talk to you about the work I did the past year and a half, with the Office of Sustainability and the triple bottom line cost benefit analysis tool. Can I pull up my first presentation now?
Yes,
Okay,
go.
just give me a second. Oh. Okay, it's loading now. Takes it a second. How does that look for everyone?
It looks great, Abbey. It's all set.
Great. So I'm going to give a really short 5-minute rundown of triple bottom line, and then I'll come back at the end of the session and we'll talk more about how do you add value to things in the triple bottom line? How do you make a cost benefit analysis out of that? And then we'll do an activity. That's at the end of the session. So right now, I just want to give everyone a background in triple bottom line so we're all at the same level. So the triple bottom line is basically a definition of sustainability and a way in which to make decisions, to think about things that aims to incorporate 3 things: environmental, social, and economic impacts. You can hear it often called the 3 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, or people, planet, profit. And this is just kind of an idea that a focus only on profit cannot account for the full cost of doing business. You may have heard these as externalities, but the TBL way of thinking helps push decision making by defining and trying to quantify incentives of more sustainable decisions. So, you know, profits is value, but what about social and environmental values? What kind of dollar signs can we use to quantify those values? And how do we get that at the table as heavily as economic value is considered? So I like to talk in examples, and there are lots and lots of examples of where the TBL was ignored and where the TBL was not ignored. So this is just a quick one, where if you think about mass-produced clothing, fast fashion, and the impacts of that, we're going to go through this a little bit more in depth in the presentation at the end, but this is just to get the juices flowing. So fast fashion makes a really cheap shirt, but at the expense of the environment and the social structure. Whereas if you put a little bit more of an investment into the social and environmental side of things, you might get something that looks more sustainable. And this example I like to use because it comes directly from Investopedia, which is who you think of as a more economic focused website. And so they say, consider a clothing manufacturer whose best way to maximize profits might be to hire the least expensive labor and to dispose of manufacturing waste in the cheapest way possible. These practices might well result in the highest possible profits for the company, but at the expense of miserable working and living conditions for laborers and damage to the natural environment and the people who live in that environment. And so I just thought it was wonderful that this came right from Investopedia, and they're thinking about it too. Now, I'm not a food person myself. You all are the experts here. And in the later presentation, I'm really excited to hear from all of you about your food opinions. But I was trying really hard to think of what the TBL could mean in food situations, in local food situations. So some of you can guess from the pictures what I'm about to say. In terms of the economy, local economic benefits from local food production is something we can talk about. In terms of the environment, reduced distances, maybe organic practices, reduced use of fertilizer, pesticides, all of that are things we can talk about. And then in terms of society, it's community building, it's maybe more healthy foods for the local community. And so we can see that really a lot of problems you think about, almost everything has all facets of the TBL that you can dig into and talk about. Some of them are harder to quantify than others, but we'll get to that later. So now that we have a baseline, I hope this helps with the context, and I hope we have a nice panel.
Thank you so much, Abby. So I'll invite us to pull down the presentation, and then we can invite our panelists to have their cameras on so we can see everyone's faces. Thank you. Just to make it as personable as we can in this digital environment. So our first question, and I just want to remind the panelists, all of these questions I believe are relevant to all of you. So I hope that you can contribute and provide examples and personal experiences for each of these. So the first question is, how does local food procurement benefit our region and our state in terms of quality of life, equity, the environment, and the economy, or the triple bottom line? What thoughts do you have in terms of those benefits, and what examples could you provide from your experiences? Susie, would you be willing to start us off?
Sure, absolutely. I think to speak to the benefits that we've experienced, I'll try to give just a really brief background on CFI and donation stations so that people know where we're coming from. But so our mission is to foster communities where everyone has equitable access to local food. And I direct the donation station, which provides immediate access to local food. We go to our local farmers market, we go to the Chester Hill produce auction, we use community donations to purchase food from those local farmers and then distribute it to people who are working in food access. And this work is really important in Athens County because we face one of the highest rates of food insecurity in the state. So we're distributing that food to partners working in food access like food pantries and free meal sites and schools. And from those partners, we hear time and again that the food they receive from donation station is some of the only fresh produce that their clients have access to, and that without this fresh produce, their clients' diets would be limited largely to highly processed foods that provide calories but little nutrients, perpetuating health problems, and ultimately perpetuating the cycle of poverty. Also, because we're purchasing food from local farmers and distributing any unsold produce that farmers donate, we reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and support long-term environmental health, which is another component of wellness in the community. And I don't want to go on too long because I know we have a lot to cover, and I want to hear from Chris and Elizabeth. But last, we're a relatively small organization. So the funding that we can, or the investment that we can make in our local food economy is somewhat limited compared to what institutions can invest. And so that's part of the reason that we're big supporters of the farm to institution work, because we need to bring everybody to the table to motivate farmers to grow food and increase our local food supply so that we can work for equitable access to that local food and work to build wellness in our community.
That's great, Susie. Thank you so much. Elizabeth, I wonder if you can give us a perspective from the state level.
Sure. And thanks, Susie. You guys are doing some amazing work there. There's a lot to be proud of. So I'm going to answer this one by focusing on two of the benefits, specifically the people and the prosperity, by talking a little bit about whole child development and economic development. So people and prosperity of the triple bottom line. And just for a quick overview, farm to school is slightly different than just straight local institutional procurement practices. It's more of a systemic approach. So we include school gardens, education, as well as, sorry, you're going to hear my dog in a minute, as well as local procurement in those three legs. So the farm to school structure really aligns beautifully with Ohio Department of Education's recently released Ohio's Whole Child Framework, which is kind of what we're talking about here. The Whole Child Framework is a tool that incorporates 5 different commonly held beliefs that reflect optimal student conditions that will lead to success in life and learning. Healthy, safe, supported, challenged, and engaged students. And where local procurement fits into that framework is actually in several of those ways. The first is just in the health of the students. And it could be something as simple as thinking of it in terms of the nutrient retention from the produce to the student. So the reduced travel time to the market just means that locally grown produce will be more nutritious, simply because there's a shorter period of time between the harvest and the serving line. But really for us, it's about establishing those healthy behaviors. So giving students the knowledge and the skills that they need to make those decisions that would positively impact both their health and their social emotional well-being. That we have one example, which I kind of love, which is from the Oregon Harvest for Healthy Kids pilot project. And they did find that there was a statistically significant difference between a pre and post intervention of willingness to try and liking of a variety of foods. The reason I like this one is because that they used rutabagas. So prior to the farm to school intervention, this was a Head Start school, 44% of the students liked rutabagas. After their intervention, 78% of their students liked rutabagas. And I don't know anyone here who has rutabagas on their regular shopping rotation, but I know it is not on mine. But if you knew that there was a 78% chance that your child was going to enjoy a rutabaga, then it probably would be. So these are just some ways that we can get that healthy behavior established early and often, and get students interested in the willingness to try, and then comes the liking of the food. So not only that, but purchasing local products also creates market opportunities for your family farmers and bolsters your local and regional food systems. We often use a metric called an economic output multiplier. And there are two that you might use. One would be for just straight up funds, and the other would be for employment. I'm going to use 2 examples that we have from Minneapolis Public Schools. So for every $1 of local food purchase, they saw a multiplier effect in the community of $1.45. And then for employment, for every $1 spent on local foods, they saw a multiplier effect of 1.96 in additional employment opportunities.
That's really exciting, Elizabeth. And I think I need to put rutabagas on my grocery shop. Thank you. Chris Chmiel, would you be able to answer this question from the regional perspective? And I'll repeat the question because I feel like it's been a while. I'm not sure if it's still fresh in our minds. But yeah, how does local food procurement benefit our region in terms of its impact on quality of life, equity in the environment, and economy?
Well, I mean, I think the ladies have already spoken to a lot of the, benefits. I mean, me personally, I feel like the health benefits are hugely understated. I just think that in our society, there's just a large amount of low quality food that's available everywhere. And, if we can train our, and unfortunately, like families have gotten away from eating, maybe the healthiest food because it takes a little time, takes a little effort to prepare foods. But I mean, I think taking that time and preparing foods, like say with your family, or say gardening and things like that, just has huge multiplied effects that are really not captured in our current economic structure. But like I think about like at the farmers market, we have vendors from many surrounding counties, and then we have shoppers from many surrounding counties. And like I really enjoy that opportunity to kind of get to know people and hear their side, what's going on and why are they there. And the stuff you get from a farmer is just different than you would get from like the store, your typical store. And having that connection, that personal connection to the land, to the earth. I think that's really understated. I mean, like I really enjoy living in a rural region, but a lot of it, to keep our community a rural community, like we really need to have agriculture as part of the economy. And, it spills over to other things. As far as like on our farm, we have solar panels. We work with local schools, the university, anybody who wants to come out and visit. There's a fair amount of resiliency that comes with all that for our society. And, obviously jobs, people having jobs and, it's somewhat challenging to make a living in the food industry. Especially, with small producers. And I think that's some of the challenges that, you guys are trying to address here at this Farm to Institution Summit. Trying to, raise the capacity of the small producers to, access the bigger buyers. So hopefully that catches some of the things we wanted to talk about.
It absolutely did, Chris. Thank you for those comments. And I think, what's interesting to me is that each of you brought up various aspects of the benefits and how it's not necessarily even just about the transactional nature of purchasing local food, but it's about the health impacts. It's about changing our relationship to food. And, I think particularly all three of you are, and Susie, I know you mentioned it just briefly, but for those of you who are unfamiliar, Community Food Initiatives supports school gardens in the area as well as multiple community gardens. And so, I think each of you are touching on, one of the significant benefits is we learn where our food comes from. And with that, forgive my punny analogy, but it plants the seed that at some point I could grow and raise my own food and then eat my own rutabagas or take them to market. And I think that's a really powerful thing, particularly for communities like ours, but also in urban communities. It really is something that has it's universal in its translatability to the local level, wherever your community may be. So we started touching on this a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and move to our second question. Before I do want to remind everyone who's listening in and participating, feel free to go ahead and put your questions in the chat or start mulling over what you would like to ask our panelists today. So our second question is, what types of metrics or evaluation strategies do you use to show the benefits of the power of local food procurement? And what limitations and opportunities do you think exist to improve data-driven support for local food procurement? Elizabeth, would you mind going first on this one? I know Ohio Department of Education has been tracking some numbers on this, and some of which you shared from other states and communities.
Sure. And actually, I will say, so I guess I'll start with limitations. a statewide effort to track and measure is rather limited at the moment. Most of our data actually comes from what is called the farm to school census. So every couple years, USDA releases a large survey, which is voluntary for schools to participate in, but that's generally where we get a lot of our data from. The last survey issued encompassed about 18,000 different school districts, and they had about a 70% response rate. Ours for the state was a little bit lower. It was just a hair under 50% that responded to the survey. I think a lot of that has to do with who they survey and their knowledge on what actually some of these activities are, or even if their school is participating in them or not. But for general purposes, I can provide this information, and that is that most of the evaluation strategies that we have are centered around the financial impact, or the again, the willingness to try, or the increased participation rates in the school meals. So our survey response for the last census indicated that we had just about $16.5 million in local foods were purchased by our school districts, and they spend about 17% of their total budget on local products. So you could kind of extrapolate from that around the state how we invest in foods. The nice thing is that the data also tells us where we spend the majority of our money. So about 62% of those funds all go towards vegetables, and we can break it down a little bit further into the actual program meal. So federal programs support 4 different meal types: breakfast, lunch, supper, and snacks. And then they also have a separate fresh fruit and vegetable program. But it should come as no surprise, given the popularity of school lunches and the numbers of participants that they have, that 86% of their local food dollars were all supporting the lunch program. So that at least gives us a little bit of direction in how schools are spending those local food dollars and where we might be able to elevate some of those supports. So for example, even though we live in this wonderful state with a lot of agriculture, only 11% of our food dollars are actually being spent towards meat or poultry. And that includes both on the producer end and on the processing end. So in order for us to consider it local, it would either have to be produced or processed in the state of Ohio. So that's kind of how we determine that. The other highly variable piece of this survey, of course, is that definition of local. And there really is no true definition of local, so it's up to the schools to define it for themselves. A lot of schools are actually purchasing local foods and don't even realize it. And so that piece of it just isn't captured it. I would say that there are significant opportunities to improve sort of data-driven support measures for local food procurement, but especially around Ohio's Farm to School grant awardees, which I think, Lynn, if you're there, I saw an awardee representing a school district on the call here today. But Ohio has a really robust success rate when it comes to being winners of these awards. And so I could see that as a really great place for us to kind of look to generate some of the data of the impact.
That's fantastic, Elizabeth. Thank you. Chris, let's pitch it over to you next in terms of what types of metric or evaluation strategies use or would like to see happen.
Well, having some conversations with our USDA Farm Service Agency staff, they were telling me stories about, just like 60 years ago, Athens County had, like, believe it or not, hundreds of orchards, and now we actually have very, very few, like less than like 5, as far as like, we have 0 like really commercial orchards. So, like we're just losing farmers. We're losing, then that, like, how our landscape, and I keep bringing up the landscape because, like, I live out in the country, and I live in the country because I like the rural areas, you know what I mean? And like, I don't want to live in, suburbia, and I don't, so, how many farmers do we have? And, how are they making a living? So like when I first moved there about 25 years ago, there was a dairy farm on one side, there was a dairy farm on the other, and, they're gone. So, and, so what's going on is all the small farms are shrinking, disappearing. And then, we're going to these mega farms, which become environmental problems, social issues, all kinds of stuff. So, the metric something that I think at the commissioner level, I'd like to start working on exploring is like farmland preservation. We have none of that right now in Athens County. I'd like to see if we could start, preserving some farms so that, that's part of our long-term planning. I think one of the other things we could look at, like say at the farmers market, we have the SNAP benefits, and, we have those green tokens. I forget what they're called, but they're like, when folks who are on SNAP come to the farmers market, they get an additional chunk of those to purchase just fresh fruits and vegetables. I think that's a pretty good metric. I don't have the numbers in my head, but I think it's been growing in the last couple of years. So I feel like that's a really great way to track basically, people who are on limited income, getting access to good fresh fruits and vegetables. There's not a really great way for us to track local food sales, at the county level. Like we get a lot of our money through sales tax, and because food is not taxed, we don't necessarily, get that information. Something else though that we could look at is every farm that we have out there also has access to a lot of USDA support money. This would go to things like, maybe putting in waterers for animals, putting in fences, doing a conservation reserve program, all these kinds of things. We could track how many landowners are accessing that kind of dollars. And that's a really significant, could be very significant. And, maybe just right now, just a small percentage of our landowners are utilizing those programs. And then that's got that multiplier effect of, in the economy, purchasing materials and working with contractors. So those are all some ways to look at the metrics.
Thank you, Chris. Susie?
Sure. We track everything that we can within our capacity at donation stations. So currently that means that we track the pounds of food that we distribute every year and the number of pantries or food access partners that we're distributing that food to, the pounds that we receive as a donation from farmers, from community gardeners, from CFI's own community gardens, from our school gardens, as well as the food that we glean from farms and gardens. So tracking everything that goes out, everything that comes in. We also track the money that we invest in our local economy at the Chester Hill Produce Auction and at the Athens Farmers Market. We also survey our food access partners every year to get their feedback and their stories. And that information is meaningful for us. It does not provide necessarily the metrics that a nonprofit needs to apply for funding. We are in the process of working with University of Buffalo and also OSU to look more into assessing the health impacts of some of the work that we do. So that's really exciting to see. And that has just come about in the past year and a half. And I think that's an opportunity for further development to get more metrics so that we can show the health benefits of some of the work that we do.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's so interesting to hear your comments. I mean, and each of you had some metrics that you're following, but I feel like each of you also pointed out some disparities or challenges associated with it. And, even with Elizabeth saying you know, and this is true not just locally but nationally. There isn't a defined, there isn't a real definition that we can adhere to about local. Everyone kind of defines it for themselves. There isn't an agreed upon criteria, which make it really challenging, and can sometimes, when we're comparing local food activities from community to community or state to state, it gets difficult to do an equitable comparison. You may be comparing apples to oranges if one community is like, oh, local food is within a 100-mile radius, and the other one is like, actually, it's 3 states, you know, and for whatever reason, those are justifiable for them, but it makes it tricky to compare. And Chris brought up the excellent and ongoing challenge, excellent, I should say, it's just important, in terms of the reduced number of active farms and farmers that we have. It was brought up in another session about you know, the age of the average farmer and ongoing concerns about what that means for our food systems, both locally and nationally, really. And I think, you know, likely many of us on this call know that a lot of that is influenced by federal policies as well as state policies that you know, have altered quite a bit since the 1970s, in particular, when Earl Butz was in charge of the USDA. So, you know, I think we're still working on finding new solutions to that problem to bring more people into the fold, find new farmers that are emerging, and you know, I think even some of the work that Elizabeth and Susie spoke to in terms of school gardens and K through 12 farm to school efforts, hopefully that will, you know, generate interest in knowing that this is a career opportunity, while we also need to carry forward the conversations about what is the monetary value that those farmers play in our communities and in our nation, and, you know, are they able to bring home the wages they need to maintain those farms, and what other supports can be provided, whether that's, you know, as Chris was mentioning, other extension service supports and things of that nature. So our third question actually kind of relates to what I was saying just now, and I didn't mean to do that. That was a sincere accident. So our third question is, what policies or practices does your organization have to promote procurement of local food and its benefits? So it gets to that policy, but also practice. So I'll repeat that again because I feel like I'm blathering on a bit. Forgive me. What policies or practices does your organization have to promote procurement of local food and its benefits? Susie, do you mind starting us off with that one?
Sure, thanks. As a policy, Donation Station only distributes locally sourced food. We intentionally fundraise every year and invite sponsorships, and then plan how to invest those funds with our local food producers. Additionally, we have started contracting farmers to increase our food supply during the winter. So trying to encourage extended season growing in the area. We also supplement our supply of produce with beans and grains from Shagbark, which is our local seed mill. But we do everything we can to support our local food economy and invest the funds that are donated by the community with our local farmers and local food producers. Another major component, though, of promoting future local food procurement is this educational outreach that works on sort of restoring our relationship with food. Thanks for using that word earlier, Mary. But so we do educational outreach on campus and then also just in the broader community, sharing recipes, workshops when it's possible to share workshops to get people excited about local food and essentially drive the demand for local food so that we can motivate more growers. And I think the more we can increase awareness of and excitement among students and communities about local food, really the more reason institutions will have to invest in it in the future.
Hey, thank you, Susie.
Sure.
Chris, what about you? I know you were talking about earlier the challenges as a county commissioner in terms of policies and practices around this, but
yeah, I mean, we do a lot, I think, right now, but we could do more. One of the things that I already mentioned was the agreement that the Athens Farmers Market has with the Job and Family Services. You know, I think that's been, I think we were one of the first in the state to do some of that stuff, and that's, you know, and we've expanded that with those other vegetable and fresh fruits and vegetables. We also support the senior nutrition program, which is you know, targeted towards seniors going to the farmers market, and so I think those are pretty effective. But you know, like we fund extension. You know, we don't have to fund extension, but we do because we, you know, think it's important. You know, we help fund soil and water. You know, that has that ripple effect of just supporting all those USDA programs. You know, like I'm participating, you know, like as my own just one commissioner, you know, with the FedHawk Farm to School program. You know what I mean? So like, there's little things that we can do. Like we worked with Ohio University, the garden program, and we had little farmers market set up here behind the courthouse. And that was a little thing that we were able to do. And let's see, working with businesses to like, there's a guy who wants to start a meat processing facility in Athens. So you know, I've been working with him to try to find some investors, find some land, you know, things like that. That would have a huge ripple effect on our local economy. You know, there's like the CAUV program, current agricultural use value, and that's like has to do with real estate taxes. A lot of those things are set up at the state level, but you know, that's all part of, you know, the local tax structure. But you know, the thing that I'm kind of hot on right now, as I mentioned earlier, is what could Athens County do with farmland preservation? You know, why haven't we participated in that program, and how could we, and what could that mean for our community? So.
Thank you, Chris. Elizabeth, what about you?
Yeah, and wow, so I'm just trying to absorb all the information, and just as an aside, I feel like I could literally spend hours talking about any one of these issues, but trying to break down each of them in just a few minutes is such a challenge. But those are just really great responses, and again, thank you everyone that's doing boots on the ground work. So at the Department of Education, a lot of ours is really driven by that wonderful whole child framework that we have to work off of it. That model really incorporates every aspect of a child's success, including the health and wellness of the community that supports that child, which is where I think a lot of the farm to school work really comes. And I'm also especially driven by some of the comments that Chris had made about the reduced farmland in our rural areas, as well as kind of supporting efforts to promote the variety of foods that people want. I'm a dietitian by trade, and I know that pretty much if you look at anyone's diet, it's the same 20 foods over and over and over again. And that's kind of why our farmland reflects what it does today. So if we can get people to eat a wider variety, that would be incredibly helpful. But the practices that we have, I'm actually really excited to share what ODE is involved in right now. We are actually working with the Ohio Department of Agriculture, specifically targeting 5 key objectives for local foods. The first one is just to strengthen the existing farm to school state network, which has been going on for 10 or more years, and they've been doing some amazing work. So we're just going to be there supporting a really regionally focused piece of that. We're also working to create a statewide marketing campaign for farm to school activities, including local procurement, which highlights the concept of the whole plate for the whole child. So focusing on fruits, veggies, as well as milk and meats. We'll be raising awareness and promotion of locally grown foods to schools and all Ohioans, specifically supported through ODA's marketing and web pages. What we really are excited about are the technical assistance and trainings that we're developing for the state. So providing farmers and ranchers with the necessary information that they need to market their product to local schools. School meals are, no surprise at all, pretty carefully regulated in what they can serve and how they can get it. Sometimes it's just a completely foreign language to other people. So finding ways to help train those farmers in learning that language so that they know how to get those foods into the schools. And then on the flip side, training the food service directors so that they understand the agricultural components and learn to speak that language so that they can have those conversations. So it'll be those 5 key objectives that ODE is really working on to promote local food resources.
Great, thank you. And I'm very excited and just want to acknowledge that in our chat, we're starting to get to some good questions here. So thank you for those. And we just have one final pre-planned question, and then we'll get to those that are in the chat. So my final question to our panelists before we open it up is, what recommendations do you have for policies and practices that could contribute additional benefit or reduce the barriers to local food procurement? What would you like to see happen next? Chris, would you want to start us off?
Okay, still trying to think of some. Well, I was actually, the farmland preservation thing, I was going to follow up on that. But, I could even just reach out to some of our other, county agencies, like, the Board of DD, or Children's Services, just to start, basically, posing that question to more agencies. I think Job and Family Services, they're working on it. Well, and actually one of the ideas that is sort of being explored right now, the county has hundreds of acres of land, and we have the old county farm, which is located out on State Route 13. There's several local people, including myself, like we see the possibility of using the county's property as a sort of a resource, and we could use it as a teaching opportunity. We had talked with Hocking College. We've had some conversations with Ohio University. How could we partner and kind of get that community and institution engagement on this. I'm sure there's more ways that we could increase local food procurement. It's just at the county level, we don't really purchase a whole lot of food for the county, but there's things that we could do to support local farms for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Susie, what's a recommendation that you would like to see happen?
Sure. Well, in 2020, we partnered with the Southeast Ohio Food Bank to purchase local food as part of our community's response to the pandemic. And that enormously increased our purchasing power. We partnered with Rural Action to deliver the produce to new partners in areas that had especially limited access to fresh produce, and ended up increasing our distribution by 75%. So almost doubling the food that we distributed. And the collaboration was amazing, but it also highlighted some of the barriers that we face when we're trying to fight hunger with locally sourced food. So our contract with the food bank was specifically a response to the pandemic, and most of the pantries that we reached out to had limited capacity to handle fresh produce, despite their interest in distributing fresh produce. So I guess all of that is to say that I would really like to see policy changes that standardize incorporating locally sourced food as part of our work that is taking place to address food insecurity. And then also thinking about standardizing addressing food security in a holistic way at young ages. So incorporating, CFI has school gardens and promoting that education about growing food from a really young age, I think is really important. Someone else can go ahead. Elizabeth is fine.
Thanks, Susie. So there's a lot of different things that we can do. I'll share probably the 4 top things that seem to be getting a lot of traction around the country and especially within the state of Ohio. The first is the extra reimbursement per meal. So in Michigan, for example, they recently they had a pilot program that now has been codified for them and has now gone statewide. But if you use locally produced foods in your meals, you get an extra 10 cents reimbursement per meal. Just to kind of capture what that means, that translates to, tens of thousands of dollars for some of the districts. And overall, I think they spent like maybe around $2 million on it statewide. So that translates into a lot of opportunity for local foods. Another one that is getting a lot of traction and interest in the state is the concept of including more locally produced, or at least identifying locally produced foods on the USDA commodities availability. So USDA foods supplies probably about 20%. I'm not a USDA foods expert, so sorry if my numbers are off, but maybe about 20% of a typical school's food budget. But sometimes it is challenging, again, because there is no legal definition of local, how a school could choose those foods specifically based off of geography. The other, of course, is then in procurement. Schools are really not allowed to base specifically off of geography when it comes to procurement, especially for any kind of processed product. You can specify geographical preference, but you can't say I'm only going to buy cucumbers if they're produced locally, for example. So there are definitely some inroads or some possibilities probably around procurement at a federal level that would have significant impact on schools' ability to purchase locally.
Wonderful. Thank you. Wow. You're right, Elizabeth. I think we could just keep on talking about all of this forever. So we do have a few minutes left for Q&A. We've got a few questions here in the chat. The first one, Susie, I might kick this over to you because I think it's specific to our situation at Ohio University, which I'm hoping you can speak to from the Farm to Ohio work group perspective. The question is, how well do we feed the students with local foods in terms of opportunities to get that local food in the dining halls possibly? And I know there are certainly, this question is going on, that there are hoops to getting local food into the dining halls. Curious about budget or the amount that has been invested. Could you speak to that a bit, Susie?
Sure. So as part of the Farm to Ohio working group, we are working with culinary services to get food into the dining halls. And culinary has committed to X number of dollars every year. And it increases over the years. And I should have that number, but I don't have that number. I think a past goal was $30,000 to invest at the CPA to bring onto local food to bring onto campus in the dining halls. Additionally, CFI is trying to make sure that the access to that local food on campus is equitable. So we are working with a food pantry that's on campus to get them local food as well. And then we've also been able to partner with the Ohio Student Farm, which we haven't talked very much about in this session yet, but the Ohio Student Farm donated about 1,000 pounds of food to Donation Station in 2020. And so that was another good resource, getting local food, but hyper local food to campus this year and into the community. Did I answer the question completely? Yeah. In session 3, they did talk about some of the challenges that culinary services and our local farmers have faced in getting that local food to campus. And you could reach out to Tom Redfern directly to talk about that. But Rural Action is working on getting farmers GAP certified, which was a requirement for the food to be brought into the central processing facility. Okay.
Thank you, Susie. And the other thing too, we have this neighborhood local product logo, which you'll see on the graphic for our Farm to Institution Summit here. But you'll find that also in our dining halls when there is a local ingredient included in any of the meals. And I have myself seen that in Baker Center. And so that's a way that we're trying to increase the awareness for the student population as well. Our next question is a good one here from Eric Ruman. I love the metrics that have been talked about, but does anyone have any data on co-curricular learning outcomes that are tied to local food procurement? Elizabeth, would you have anything of this? I wonder if this is something that maybe an Ohio Department of Education.
So there, and just, I may or may not be understanding the question correctly, but so my answer may reflect that. There is some research out there that is around farm to school activities and grade outcomes and knowledge-based surveys, things like that. And there is plenty of evidence to support that that farm to school helps with retention and absenteeism and supports higher grades. But do I have those data numbers? Obviously not at my fingertips, or I wouldn't be stumbling. But there is some out there. Generally, the struggle is because farm to school activities also promote education. The buy-in usually comes when we can coordinate that curriculum around state learning standards. And that is, and it just makes sense, right? Because why would a school want to invest all of that time if they can't also get to those state standards? So probably one of the more successful folks are going to be the ones that have an educator on their team, a farm to school educator that knows how to align their lesson plans with that. And it can come anywhere. You can learn math in the garden. So there's a lot of really, really wonderful opportunities. Is it at all possible that I answer that in any way, shape, or form?
I believe so. And I think you actually touched on our final question as well, that maybe you can speak to briefly. And Susie, I think you might be able to contribute to this as well. What is the potential for food or gardening education to become a core component of public school curriculum versus just an extracurricular or after school activity?
So I guess from an ODE perspective, we have state, and I am not a curriculum or education person in any way, shape, or form. So if I say anything wrong, I really apologize. But we have state learning standards, and those come through, the top down. There has been a lot of interest in incorporating nutrition education, for example, through the state legislature, and I know that has been really challenging to get passed. But for the most part, Ohio is a local control state as well. So the local schools control a lot of what they do or don't offer, especially in regards to after school activities or in school lesson plans. So that would probably be more Susie's wheelhouse.
CFI is currently working on trying to standardize garden education in elementary schools. And as far as the chance of that happening, I'm not sure I can speak very well to that, but we are working on it. we have great collaboration with the schools here. Molly Gassaway is our director of garden programs, and she has been working to develop Sprouts programming that connects all the dots, essentially, gets kids excited about gardening and helps students learn where our food comes from. And then we hope that that knowledge is taken home to parents, and Donation Station has education, but it's not directly in schools about cooking. So we're working on it.
That's great. And we also, I don't know if anyone's here from Live Healthy Appalachia, another nonprofit organization based here in Athens, serving the region that does provide Live Healthy Kids curriculum, which helps introduce elementary school aged children to fresh local food. Oh, great. Looks like we do have someone here from that. So I want to acknowledge that I've allowed us to go just a touch over time. So I want to thank all of our panelists and participants today. This has been a lively conversation. This session will now transition to our Triple Bottom Line interactive workshop. So before we jump into that, I want to encourage you to complete our feedback survey, which would be at the top of the chat, to give us your feedback about this session and the summit overall. You can also use the link that should be at the top of the chat for our Discord channel if you'd like to connect and engage with each other or any of us. And I will now pass it over to Nikki Olms, who will provide a description of how this interactive workshop will take place.
Good afternoon, everyone. So similar to the keynote and the welcome session, if you were involved in that, we will actually be doing breakout rooms. I have automatically assigned everybody into a room, and the breakout rooms will last for about 10 minutes. Earlier in the chat, Abbey had posted an Excel worksheet. If you could, she is going to give some information on how to download that so that you can use that as a tool once you go into the breakout rooms.
I will post that again at the end of the presentation, along with instructions on how to open it and whatnot. So don't fear.
Thanks, Abbey. I will actually go ahead and turn it over to you, Abbey. That way you can do your presentation. And then upon your cue, I will go ahead and open the breakout rooms. Again, the breakout rooms will last for 10 minutes. I will give you a 2-minute warning, and then you will all be pulled back into the session. If at any time you need assistance or would like to talk to Abbey, you can simply click the Return to Main Session button, which will be next to your red leave button. Please don't click the leave button, as that will take you fully out of the session. But you'll be able to return to the session and then go back into the breakout room if you need to. Also, once you get into the breakout rooms, if there are a small number of folks, you can send me an @ message. If you just type the @ symbol and my last name, OHMS, that will flag me and I can reassign you into another breakout room if you would like. So Abbey, I will go ahead and turn it over to you. And I think you're muted, Abbey.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
So before we get into the breakout rooms, I'm going to talk for a few minutes to get us back in the way of thinking of TBL. But actually, everyone here has already been talking about TBL the whole time. I was very excited listening to all the responses. And so I think a lot of what we just talked about is going to be very applicable here. Now, as I said, I'm not specifically a food person. I work, I was very happy to see that a lot of you are more on the social side of things. I'm personally more on the environmental side of things, so my bias is more that way. But right now I'm going to be talking more about the triple bottom line and how Ohio University, my group at Ohio University, has been working to make a triple bottom line cost benefit analysis tool, and how we're working to do a cost benefit analysis with the ideas of the triple bottom line in mind. So we're going to start with the basics. What is a cost benefit analysis? Well, it's a decision-making tool. It's a way to measure the benefits of the decision. So any decision you make, any project you want to implement, you can quantify, you can list the costs and the benefits of it and use it to say, is this decision worth making? Is it not worth making? Maybe we need to add some things here, take away some things there. And I have an example, a cute little example of a restaurant that wants to hire an Italian chef. And so they do their cost benefit analysis and they tabulate, they itemize things that could be costs and things that could be benefits. So in costs, you have the salary of the chef, the transportation from Italy to the United States, those kinds of things. And then on the benefits side, they have what they are predicting to be the benefits they're getting from hiring the chef, which is mostly we're going to get new customers, we're going to get more money from the customers that we have, more customer satisfaction kind of thing. And so at the end of their cost benefit analysis, they are saying that their total benefits are going to be $400,000 and their total costs are $290,000. And so in that case, they might decide, yes, that's enough. We can make this decision. Or maybe they'll say, no, it's not enough. Let's rethink things. So if we remember from the introduction, the TBL is also including social and environmental impacts. Now, in that Italian chef example, they really only included the economic benefits. And so if they wanted to include TBL, they would have added things like the local societal impact of having a diverse food culture, or maybe the carbon footprint of the flight that the chef needs to take to get from Italy to the United States. But they can also include some trickier things like what is the reduced carbon footprint of customers not having to travel to Italy to experience an Italian chef. And so you get into these really big situations where you just so many what ifs. But the TBL impacts are often ignored. But as you can see from those examples, sometimes they're quite large. And they do provide substantial impacts. And when these kinds of impacts are overlooked, they become externalized. And so usually they're externalized as cost to either the environment or social structures. So we're back to our example of clothes. So cheap clothes can be cheap because they don't account for these externalized costs that are taken on by the environment and people. If we think of the waste produced in terms of pollution produced, the working conditions, we can see why the economic cost is so low. Whereas more responsibly produced clothing can find a balance of the TBL, which we call sustainability. So to the meat of this, how do we measure the value of those social and economic traits? Or the social and environmental traits, actually, I should say. Well, we think about this in a couple ways. One, what do people value? And two, what causes problems? And so we'll be calling these things cost avoidance and benefit attainment to fit with our theme of cost benefit analysis. So in terms of cost avoidance, we have a couple things we can think about in terms of examples. Putting in the time to make a safe work environment could reduce injuries. So you're avoiding those injuries, you're avoiding those costs. Putting in the time to make a easily disposable product, a biodegradable product, you avoid the pollution. So you're avoiding that cost of fixing the pollution. And then in terms of benefit attainment, you can think about it, if you make that nice environment, the safe environment for your employees, you have happier employees. And that could mean there's a value to just being happy, of course. But also maybe it could be better worker productivity, better satisfaction. And then there's other things like branding, which is something that's very important. Companies care about what their image is, what they look like. So these are some of the ways you can think about measuring them. But how would you actually put a dollar sign on things like that? How do you, in order to communicate with the economic world, we want to be talking in terms of dollar signs, right? So to do this, we do a couple different things. You can do something with direct value. So you compare the direct value of an item or a service to similar direct values. So how much would you pay for the item or service? For example, in areas without clean drinking water, how much do people pay to get their drinking water, like shipped in from elsewhere? From there, as you go down the list, it only gets more subjective and difficult. So we have more tricks to give dollar sign estimations. My first example here, Sam and Alex are ranking fruits, right? Really simple. And Sam likes the pears the most, Alex likes the apples the most. And from that, we can at least say that the oranges are valued the least. So things like that, thinking creatively, let's say, to give a value to things that are harder to give a value to. There's also something to note in things like third-party certifications, like the USDA organic label or the Rainforest Alliance label. These are things that back up the claims of products to certain things, like I am organic. And the fact that businesses are willing to pay for the certification and customers are willing to seek out the items with certification means that there's a value there. And there's different ways we can use that as well. So here's an example with both avoided costs and benefits attained. Now, the indirect nature of these kinds of things makes it a little bit more difficult to quantify with like the traditional cost benefit analyses methods, which is mostly economic methods. So the cost of repairing a sidewalk seems simple, like it's just the cost that the city or the homeowner has to pay. But a repaired sidewalk can avoid injuries, which is basically just a way to say you're avoiding externalizing the cost of the sidewalk repair to the injured person as a healthcare cost. However, you're missing out on benefits because of the nice sidewalk can add to the value of a neighborhood or a home. And people like friendly sidewalks, and what people like is valuable. So this is actually, the sidewalk example seems silly, but it's actually a real example that my colleague did as a project for a city. They wanted to know, should we repair our sidewalks? And so he found studies that said property values are generally higher if the sidewalks are nice. And he found other studies that reported frequency and cost of injuries to sidewalks. And with a little digging, he was able to make a TBL case to the city about the indirect value and the externalized costs that was not typically included in their CBAs. And all of this over some sidewalks. So these problems have a lot more depth than you would expect when coming at it from a TBL perspective. Now, what I was just talking about, how my colleague went and researched things, this is the basis for what we do when we're doing a TBL CBA. We start looking for how much values these indirect costs and benefits have. And then we need to rely on these financial proxies. So this is just a way to assign a monetary value to a non-financial outcome. We've been talking about this throughout the presentation, even if you didn't know the name. So I'm not an expert in every field. Shocking, I know. Therefore, I have to find experts and rely on what they say. During the panel discussion, there was a lot of talking about what are the numbers for this, who reports on this, who collects data on this. And that's exactly who we're searching out. We have to rely on those people to be able to make these claims, these TBL, CBA. Now, I'm sure there's someone out there who passionately studies sidewalks, and they have things I could never, ever come up with. And they may have already written about the value of nice sidewalks. So therefore, when I first do my TBL, CBA, I'm going to brainstorm impacts of the project or decision I'm working on. And then we go look for these proxies. We go look for the experts. And sometimes you can find things that are out there. So you can find things like these direct values. We spoke before about comparing to what people are already paying for some good or service, right? And then we can also look at cost avoidance and benefit attainment, like in the sidewalk example. And then if the service or product is novel or hard to quantify, we have to work a little harder and use comparisons with some assumptions and discounting. So for example, the value of organic food could be the cost of the certification to label it as organic. But since certification is not the whole story here, we can add or subtract some discount factors from this, or make some assumptions that it's the certification plus a little, minus a little. So discount factors are just a way to give a more reasonable estimate when the data is simply non-existent, when it hasn't been studied yet. And then lastly, there are cases where if you see at the bottom, the evidence-based supporting documentation, which is a fancy way to say when we go ask the experts in other fields, when it's very difficult to obtain, that's in the case of these indirect economic values. So an example of this was when I was looking to see if we could ascribe a value to good soils, to protecting soils. Well, how do you define good? And good may be defined differently between a farmer and a builder. And so there's often a lack of data here. Things are subjective. And there are things that no one studied yet, or that no one is tracking. So it gets quite complicated. So we're going to move on to the activity now, where everyone here is going to get the chance to do a small little TBL-CBA. So I will put an Excel file in the chat. And what you're going to need to do is download it. It looks like I can't upload it. Can someone give it a try for me? But what you're going to do is you're going to have to download the Excel file to your computer. If you just open it as it is, it will open in a group file and everyone will be trying to edit the same thing at once, and it's a little crazy. But if you download it, there'll be more instructions within it, and I'm actually going to open it up and show everybody the exercise, and we can talk about it, and then we'll go into breakout rooms, and we can brainstorm in pairs or small groups, and then we're going to come back and talk about what we brainstormed. So I'm going to share the worksheet. Is that showing up okay?
Yep, we can see it, Abby.
Great. So looks a little complicated, but basically on the left-hand side is the activity. In the middle is some instructions if you need a refresher. And over here are the impact categories that we're going to choose. So the first thing you can do is come here and choose a category. What kind of project, what kind of, you get to be creative here. What kind of project do you want to implement? Any project, anything you can think of. And what you're going to need is a project case and then the base case. So the project case is what are you going to do? And the base case is what is the status quo right now? What's happening right now? So here we just pick a category, and it's probably food, since you guys are food people. And then you decide on your project case and your base case. So I have an example on the other page if you need to look at an example. I'm a plant person. So my example was in grounds, and the project was let's install a pollinator garden. And the base case is let's install a lawn by seeding grass. So it can be really simple like that. And then what you're going to do is you pick these impacts in orange from this orange category over in column V, or you can come up with impact categories yourself. These are just areas in the triple bottom line in economic, environmental, and social issues that you think are general areas that could be important to your project. So in terms of this grounds example of installing a pollinator garden, I chose capital cost because there's going to be some kind of upfront cost to installing the project. I chose operations and maintenance because you have to maintain the land. I chose land and soil because it's on the land, things like that. And what you're going to do is you're going to rank each category as a cost or a benefit. Is it a high cost? You would choose this. Is it a high benefit? You would choose this. And then there's everything in between. And what you'll end up with is some kind of value down here, and that's your cost benefit analysis. If it's negative, you're more towards the benefit. If it's positive, it's more towards the cost. So that in general is the activity. And after that, there are questions at the bottom to get your mind flowing. So it'd be great if we could get into small groups and come up with some project and try to do a TBL-CBA on it. And then we're going to come back and talk about what you did, what your project is, what you think are the important costs and benefits of it.
Okay, real quick, Abby, I just wanted to point everybody to the chat before we start the breakout rooms to let you know that your file is in the group chat above the evaluations. It should be at the very top of the meeting chat. I tried to upload it again and it's not allowing me either. So hopefully folks will be able to do it from the file that you originally shared. It is an Excel spreadsheet. It's TBL-CBA at the very top of the screen. With that, I will go ahead and start the breakout rooms if everybody is okay with that. And again, if you are the only one in a room or you want to be added to a room with more folks so that you can have more collaboration and more sharing, just send me that message in the chat within the breakout room, and I will be able to assign everybody to a different room. Again, I will give you a 2-minute warning when we are close to pulling you all back into the main session. All right, they will start here momentarily.
super helpful because we're trying to do things at the farm that have a cost, but the university doesn't want to help us with because they can't see the benefit.
Yeah.
So
this is a like greatly simplified version.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever want to see what our real TBL CBAs look like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot more complicated because we do find those financial proxies, and then we have all these connections. And the cool thing about the tool is it's in Excel, so it's dynamic. So if you're having a discussion with someone and they say, I don't believe your proxy, I don't believe it's that much money, you can go change it and it updates all of your numbers, and then you can go from there.
Thanks. That's good. Is there a particular place there might be information about a more complex version of what you showed us available to use?
You can just shoot me an email.
Okay, I will do that. Thanks.
Okay.
And David, hopefully we'll be getting a paper published on this soon. So we've got a draft and hoping to submit it soon to, is it Environmental Economics, Abbey? Is that the name of the journal? Okay, yeah. So more on that soon. David will send you the link to the paper if it gets published.
So does anyone have their project or their exercise that they want to talk about? Anything cool that you came up with? Anything unexpected?
Well, we didn't get very far in ours, but I am trying to find ways to bring solar to the Ohio Student Farm at Ohio University. And so I looked at sort of the potential costs, the capital costs, and then we talked about what the benefits would be. So I don't think we came to a resolution. It took a little while to get things going, but it's a great start.
And our group just talked and made some great connections. So we didn't actually do the worksheet either. Sorry, Abbey. And David, Abby's first case study that she did with the triple bottom line cost benefit analysis was with solar. So she probably has some great fiscal proxies she can share with you that you can use in your triple bottom line cost benefit analysis.
Excellent, thanks.
Yep. Okay, I think we are probably over time, so I guess I'll just ask, unless Abby, you want to jump back in, but I just ask that everybody complete the session evaluation, which was in the chat earlier. So if you scroll all the way back up to the top, you'd find it. And then also we do have a survey for to see if people want to continue the conversation, if they want to share their email addresses or participate in a future like listserv or something on this topic. So if you can find those two surveys back in your chat, and then I believe this would conclude our summit. And Nikki, can you leave it open for a few minutes for people to complete those surveys, and then close us? Okay, great.
Yeah.
And then if you are finished, you just hit the leave button. Is that correct, Nikki?
Yes.
Can you link the survey again, Elaine?
Yeah, thanks. I can't see it, and I must have not been.
Okay, just a second. Let me.
I don't know if it's like, so with the Excel file, it just refused to let me upload it again. But if it's a link, it should be okay.
Yeah, let me just go back to Qualtrics and get that link.
I'm sending those now.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Faster than me.
Thanks, I got it.